tell you some stories this morning, and I know stories. You go, wow, stories. But these are really neat stories. These are called folk tales. How many of you know what folk tales are? What are folk tales? Stories, right? Folk tales are stories that are passed down from generation to generation, from father to son, and from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter. And these in particular are Jewish folk tales. Y'all listening? These are Jewish folk tales. And these folk tales came about in a time when life for Jewish people was very, very difficult. Have you ever had some of those times when life's pretty hard and you think, well, why are things going so difficult for me? Well, these came down in a time when life was really difficult for Jewish people. And these are stories that take place in the city of Chelm. This is pronounced Chelm. Good. There are three Jewish folk tales. Y'all listening? There are three Jewish folk tales that we put all together in one story, and I think you're going to like it. Now listen real carefully. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. If you're really interested, after the show, we're going to have some question and answer time. So you can ask also any questions that you want about what we're talking about things going on. And the authors that write these stories, if you can remember their names, or if your teachers can, their names are Isaac Bashevet Singer and Shalom Alechem. And if you look in your card catalog in your library here, I'm sure you can find some stories written by those authors. Now listen real carefully. Shh. Once upon a time, in a country far across the seas, there existed a peaceful little town on the banks of a bubbling blue river. The people of this town were generous, simple, and hardworking. This was the town of Chelm. Oh, but I'm forgetting one important fact about Chelm. What made this town different from every other town was that the people who lived there were fools. Can you imagine that? Or was I? Oh yes, the butcher was a fool, the baker was a fool, and even the candlestick maker, he was a fool. The funny thing was that they didn't know they were fools, and being that they were fools, they had a lot of foolish problems. So they decided to choose sages to be their town spokespeople, to solve all their foolish problems in their own foolish way. Now, the sages were on their way to a very important meeting. There was foolish Dopey Lekish.
Why do I always get wet when I stand in the rain?
The Duns. Foolish Schmendrick Numbskull.
Now, where was I going?
The Forgetful. Foolish Seinfeld Ninny.
I know where it is.
The Know-It-All. And finally, Gold the Ox, the wisest fool of them all.
Sages?
Well, but back to the story. You see, the sages were meeting because there were two townspeople, Chaim, the fishmonger, and Shlemiel, the baker. Now, these two men became involved in an argument over what the word crisis meant. Now, they had been discussing it all evening, but they couldn't figure out what it meant. You see, one day, Chaim came into Shlemiel's bakery and said, "A crisis is coming. Ice will fall from the mountains. Oh, what a crisis!" And then Shlemiel said, "Crisis has nothing to do with ice. A crisis is merely when your sister cries." Well, they got into a horrible fight. Half the town supported Chaim, and half the town supported Shlemiel. There was even more on Western Chelm, and Western Chelm declared more on Eastern Chelm, and it was a mess. So Gold Ox called an emergency meeting of the sages to decide what the word crisis meant. Now, they had been discussing this word all evening, but they couldn't come up with an answer.